All right, welcome to the Ironwood Gym. Today, gonna just give you something to think about. All right. Um, Oftentimes, quite often, we talk about how rounding the back is bad, and you're gonna have a disc or a vertebrae shoot across the room, and you're gonna be injured for the rest of your life. Okay, it's probably not that quite that extreme, but if this is my body, we don't want to see, this is what's commonly taught, okay? We don't want to see, this is my head up here, okay? This is my hips right here. We don't want to see this rounding of the spine, okay? That's what's commonly taught. Don't round the spine. Don't round your back while you're lifting. Some companies even go to the extent to teach their athletes to lift in unsafe manners to accomplish this. But is that really the truth? And I just want to point some things out. Again, this is just something to think about. Just want to point some things out that should make you kind of wonder if rounding the back is actually as bad as what everyone says it is. And I want to include in this statement, I am in no way, just for liability reasons, I guess, I am in no way advocating for you to go round your back while you're lifting, while you're picking up your child or your dog, or picking up a spoon off the floor, or deadlifting 800 pounds. I am not advocating for you to do these things with a rounded back. I just think this is something we should put a little bit more thought into versus just accepting what everyone says that it's bad. All right, so I'm going to give you a couple examples where this doesn't really hold true. And then kind of my thoughts on what I've noticed throughout my 30 years involved in lifting. So the first one, if you've ever watched World's Strongest Man and seen those guys lift, there are many times where you see them put their spine in a compromised position. And I'm talking they're handling 300 plus pounds, putting their spine in a very compromised position. So the easiest example is the stone lift. Okay, and usually that's a loading event where they're picking up the stone off the ground. It's completely on the ground. They got to get their hands around it, and it's way down there because a lot of these guys are actually fairly tall. They have to lift it and then put it up onto the pedestal that's standing in front of them. So when they do that, now some of the strongmen actually squat down and kind of get their feet around the ball, squat down, and they're able to keep their low back in a more neutral position. But some do not. Some definitely get that rounded position. And I've watched numerous, I don't go to strongman events, so I can't sit here and say I've seen thousands of people do this. I've simply watched a lot of World's Strongest Man. And I will say, I tried to lift a stone one time, and I did not like the position that my back was in, and I just dropped the stone and didn't even attempt it. So, did not feel comfortable in that position at all, did not feel right, and I had bigger goals than lifting a stone that day. I had goals of actually competing in powerlifting, so I wasn't going to take that risk. But numerous times you will see them round their lower back. But yet I've never, and I'm certain it has happened, but at least in the ones that I have watched, I've never seen someone hurt their back doing stones. I have seen them get hurt, just not their low back. So, or at least I wasn't aware of it if they did. And generally the low back is something that shows up pretty quick. But if it's so bad and they're lifting so much weight doing it and repeatedly, because they never just lift one stone, they go down the line and it's heavier and heavier and they just keep doing it. If it was so bad for you, why don't they get hurt? Or why don't we see more injuries than what we actually see? Another one is a deadlift. Now, as a competitive power or former competitive powerlifter, most people deadlift and keep their back in decent position. But at pretty much every meet you go to, you're going to see someone get completely rounded over, and it's the ugliest thing you'd ever see. But many of these people don't actually get hurt. Why is that? So, I will say that I have hurt my back 3 or 4 times deadlifting. I can think of 3 right off the top of my head. And every time I had rounded my back. But I also lifted many times and let my back round and didn't get hurt. So what's going on? How come sometimes I get hurt and sometimes I don't? Well, you could say luck of the draw, but I think there's a little bit more to it than that. There is also, I believe, it's on Barbell Shrugged, and it might not be, but I think it is. But there's an exercise. I'm not going to use the correct term because the correct term is not very nice, but it starts with monkey. The next letter is F and it ends with ers, so you can figure it out from there. But this exercise involved basically having your low back completely rounded with the weight very low. I believe it was with a barbell and the weight was actually below the feet. They were standing on an elevated platform or on blocks, and they would completely round their back over and then just do this basically with their low back. They never stood all the way up. So this is their head, this is their feet, and they would lower themselves and then stand part of the way up, but not all the way. So their low back was almost completely rounded throughout the entire movement. That just has recipe for disaster written all over it. Or at least it seems that way. So, from all these examples, you'd think we'd see a lot more injuries than what we do. And trust me, there's plenty of injuries out there. But I think, to me, the biggest time that I've seen people get hurt or experienced it in myself is not when there was a rounded back. It was when the back rounded. Okay, and let me explain the difference there. So a person starts with a good position, and then in the middle of the pull, when they start to fail, or their technical failure, if you watch my video on defining failure, when they start to have technical failure and that back starts to round, that's when the injury happens. Okay? So if their back is rounded and they do the entire lift, but their spine does not change positions during the movement, in my experience, there's no injuries there. It's when the position of the spine changes during the movement. So as they're coming up, they round. So if they start rounded, they lift all the way to the top and then straighten out at the top, they're okay. But if they start good, if they start in that acceptable position, and then as they're lifting, it starts to round, that's when the injury occurs. That's in my experience. That's what I've seen. So, again, in no way, shape, or form am I advocating for you to go start rounding your back and saying, oh, well, it didn't round while I was moving. It was already rounded and I could maintain the same position. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying these are things that we should think about and kind of my observations through 30 years in the lifting world, from coaching to competing to just striving to be as strong as I can for that entire time. If you have any comments on this, if you have any questions, if you have things that you've noticed when these injuries actually occur, please put them in the comments. I'd like to hear them. I'd like to know what your thoughts are on it. But I do think we should question as far as, and this probably gets more into the science part of this, when we should be questioning when these injuries are actually occurring, what's actually bad, what's actually not. And there's actually a whole host of people out there now that's saying arching is bad for the back, which is what we were taught to do for so many years. Again, you got any comments, you got any feedback, questions, leave them in the comments. This is just something to think about, not fact, not necessarily a rule to live by, just something to think about. If you like the video, hit the like button. If you like the channel, hit the subscribe button. If you know someone you think can get something out of this, share it with them. Share it with those coaches, those lifters that you know, the fitness enthusiasts that you know that you think may be able to learn something or might enjoy these videos. Till next time, as always, be in the pursuit of strength.